I came home for Thanksgiving. The house was empty except for my husband's stepfather in a rocking chair. A note said, "Gone on a cruise with my ex. You'll stay home and take care of stepdad. He needs you." The stepfather opened one eye and said, "Shall we begin?" I nodded. 4 days later, my husband was begging. The note trembled in my fingers as the blood drained from my face. Gone on a Caribbean cruise with Hannah. Mom decided to come too since she needed a break. You'll stay home and take care of Victor. He needs you back Monday. Brady. I read it twice, certain there must be some mistake. The paper fluttered to the kitchen counter as my hand went numb. He's not coming back until Monday. Is he? The raspy voice behind me made me jump. I turned to see Victor watching me from the doorway, leaning heavily on his cane, but with eyes far too alert for the decrepit old man Brady had described. "No," I managed, my voice barely audible. "No one is. They've all gone on a cruise." Victor nodded slowly as if he'd expected this exact scenario. "Left you with the dirty work, didn't they?" Classic Brady move. I had arrived at the Mitchell family home just 30 minutes earlier. My car was packed with gifts and ingredients for Thanksgiving dinner. The silent house should have been my first clue. No delicious aromas of roasting turkey. No football game blaring from the living room television. No cheerful greetings. Instead, I found only an unheated house and Brady's stepfather sitting alone in a rocking chair, looking at me with those uncomfortably perceptive blue eyes. "I don't understand," I said, sinking into a kitchen chair. "We've been planning this Thanksgiving dinner for months. His mother was supposed to host. Everyone was coming." I pulled out my phone and tried Brady's number again. Straight to voicemail, just like the previous 3 attempts. Victor shuffled to the refrigerator and pulled out a pitcher of water. "Been like this all week. Quiet as a tomb." They left Tuesday morning. He poured himself a glass with slightly shaking hands. "Didn't even stock the fridge properly. Hope you brought groceries." I hadn't. I'd brought cranberries, sweet potatoes, and my special apple pie ingredients. Contributions to what was supposed to be a family feast, not provisions for an abandoned holiday. My phone pinged with a notification. With a surge of hope, thinking it might be Brady, I quickly checked it. Instead, it was an Instagram alert. Brady's sister had tagged him in a photo. With trembling fingers, I opened the app. The image knocked the wind from me. Brady standing on a cruise ship deck, his arm around a young blonde woman I recognized as Hannah, his work colleague he'd mentioned increasingly often these past months. They were holding champagne flutes, toasting the camera. The caption read, #New Beginnings Caribbean Getaway with at Brady Mitchell and Family. Family. The word stung like salt in an open wound. I scrolled through more photos. There was Brady's mother, Elaine, sipping a cocktail, looking anything but like someone who needed a break from caring for Victor. Another photo showed Brady and Hannah at what appeared to be a romantic dinner. The post was timestamped 2 days ago, which meant this had been planned long before Brady told me we were expected at his mother's for Thanksgiving. "Find something interesting?" Victor asked, studying my face. I turned the phone screen toward him. "They're on a cruise with Hannah from his office. The one he said was just a colleague." My voice cracked. They've been planning this while I was buying gifts and taking time off work for what I thought was a family Thanksgiving. Victor nodded grimly. "Hannah's been in the picture at least 3 months. She's called here asking for Brady several times." Pretty voice. Terrible laugh. I stared at him. "You knew I know a lot of things they don't think I notice." He tapped his temple with a gnarled finger. "Mine's still sharp despite what Brady tells everyone." My thoughts raced to our bank account. With shaking hands, I opened our banking app. 3 days ago, $5,200 withdrawal. Almost our entire savings, money we'd been putting aside for a down payment on a house. The house Brady had promised we'd start looking for after the holidays. "He took our savings," I whispered, showing Victor the screen. "All of it." Victor wasn't surprised. They've been doing the same to me for years. Taking a little here, a little there. For your care, Victor, they say. Meanwhile, the heat's turned down to save money. My medications are sometimes delayed. And Elaine buys herself another designer purse. I felt sick. This wasn't just about a ruined Thanksgiving or even the betrayal of an affair. This was calculated abandonment of me, of Victor, of responsibilities and promises. My phone rang. My best friend Leah calling to wish me happy Thanksgiving. I silenced it, unable to explain this humiliation just yet. There's leftover soup, Victor offered. Not much of a Thanksgiving feast, but it'll do. I looked around the kitchen. Dirty dishes in the sink, empty takeout containers on the counter. They hadn't even cleaned up before leaving. Something hardened inside me. No, I said firmly. We deserve better than leftover soup. I grabbed my coat and purse. I'm going to the grocery store. They might still have some turkey breasts and potatoes. We're having a proper meal today. Victor looked surprised, then pleased. Haven't had a home-cooked meal in months. Brady always brings fast food when he bothers to come by. At the grocery store, my mind whirled with questions and emotions. How long had Brady been planning to leave me? Was our entire 5-year marriage just a convenient arrangement he could discard when something better came along? I mechanically selected a small turkey breast, potatoes, and some vegetables, barely registering the other last-minute shoppers around me. When I returned, Victor had managed to clear the kitchen counter and was sitting at the table with a stack of papers. What's all this? I asked, setting down the groceries. Evidence, he replied, his blue eyes suddenly steely. Bank statements, medical records, documented neglect. I've been keeping track for months. He pushed a folder toward me. Brady and Elaine think I'm just a burden waiting to die. They don't know I've been watching them strip my accounts while providing minimum care. I glanced at the papers, detailed notes, account statements showing suspicious transfers, copies of medical recommendations that had been ignored. Why are you showing me this? I asked, unsettled by his methodical documentation. Victor leaned forward, suddenly looking less frail. Because you've been wronged, too, Jade, and because I don't have much time left. He tapped a medical report. Terminal cancer. 3 months at most. I sat down heavily across from him. I'm so sorry, Victor. He waved away my sympathy. Don't be sorry. Be smart. He looked at me with unexpected intensity. They think they've left you with a burden, but they've actually given us an opportunity. An opportunity for what? Victor's thin lips curved into a smile that transformed his face. For justice. He reached for an envelope and slid it across the table. Inside is my real will and trust documents, not the one Brady and Elaine think exists. I didn't touch the envelope. Victor, I don't understand. He leaned back in his chair and studied me. After a moment, he simply said, "Shall we begin?" Those 3 words hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility and hidden meaning. Before I could respond, he explained his proposition, help him document the family's neglect and betrayal, assist with his final arrangements, and he would ensure I'd be taken care of financially after he was gone. The family who abandoned us both would lose everything they thought was coming to them. I stared at him, this man I barely knew, but with whom I suddenly shared a profound connection. We had both been deceived and discarded by the same people. Outside, the late afternoon shadows lengthened across an empty driveway where a family should have gathered. Inside, an unexpected alliance was forming. Yes, I said finally, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Let's begin. After our agreement, Victor sank back in his chair, exhaustion evident in the slump of his shoulders. The excitement of our newfound alliance had temporarily energized him, but now the fatigue returned to his face. You should rest, I said, noticing the power beneath his weathered skin. I'll finish making our dinner. Victor shook his head. First, there's something you need to see. He pushed himself up with effort. My medical records. You need to understand what we're working with and how little time we have. He led me to a small bedroom that had clearly once been an office, but was converted into a makeshift sleeping space. A hospital bed occupied one corner, though Victor hadn't been using it. Instead, a regular twin bed against the opposite wall showed signs of use. Can't stand that contraption, he explained, gesturing at the hospital bed. Makes me feel like I'm already in hospice. From a locked drawer in the desk, Victor withdrew a thick folder labeled Simply Medical. He handed it to me without ceremony. Pancreatic cancer, he said flatly as I opened it. Stage 4 diagnosed 3 months ago. I scanned the documents, my stomach tightening at the clinical descriptions and grim prognosis. Various oncologists' notes, treatment recommendations, and scan results told the unmistakable story of a terminal illness. 2 months, Victor added. Maybe less now. The last scan showed rapid progression. I looked up sharply. Brady knows this. Oh, yes, they all do. His mother was at the appointment when we got the diagnosis. 2 days later, she started talking about how she needed a break from caretaking. His laugh held no humor. 66 years old and claiming exhaustion while I'm dying at 78. The cruelty of it struck me like a physical blow. They abandoned you knowing you only had months left. Weeks more likely. Victor eased himself onto the edge of the bed. But that's not even the worst of it. Look at the medication list. I flipped to the prescription sheets. Multiple medications were listed. Pain management, anti-nausea drugs, enzymes to help with digestion. Check the bathroom cabinet, Victor directed. Compare what's there with what should be there. In the adjoining bathroom, I found a disorganized collection of pill bottles. As I examined them, comparing with the documentation, disturbing discrepancies emerged. The powerful pain medication had been refilled twice according to the pharmacy labels, but the bottle was nearly full. The expensive enzyme supplements were only half full when they should have been almost untouched based on the refill date. They'd been diluting them, Victor confirmed when I returned with the evidence. 1 pill instead of 2. Half doses of the pain medication and those appointments for the palliative care specialist. Too expensive, Elaine said. My hands trembled with anger as I returned the documentation to its folder. That's not just neglect, Victor. That's abuse. It's what happens when people see you as an obstacle rather than a person. He pulled a small notebook from beneath his pillow and handed it to me. I've been keeping track. Times when medications were missed or reduced, appointments cancelled, money that disappeared from my checking account for home care supplies that never materialized. The meticulous documentation stunned me. Pages of dates, times, specific incidents. Despite his illness, Victor's mind remained razor-sharp. Let me fix you something to eat, I said, needing a moment to process everything. You must be hungry. In the kitchen, I found pitiful supplies, a few cans of soup, some stale bread, milk on the verge of spoiling. From my grocery run, I managed to put together a decent meal of roasted turkey breast, mashed potatoes, and green beans. Not the Thanksgiving feast I'd planned, but far better than leftover soup. As we ate at the small kitchen table, Victor studied me. Tell me about your marriage, he said finally. When did you first notice Brady wasn't who you thought he was? The directness of the question caught me off guard. I poked at my food, considering how to answer. It was gradual, I admitted. When we first met, Brady was attentive, supportive of my graphic design work. I was building my client base, had my own small studio apartment, good friends. I paused, realizing how much had changed. After we married, he suggested I work from home to save on studio rent. Made sense financially, but then my equipment kept having issues. Computer problems, software glitches. Victor nodded knowingly. Isolation tactic. Exactly. Then came suggestions about which clients weren't worth my time. Concerns about me being out late with friends. He'd check my phone claiming he was just looking for a number. The patterns were so clear in hindsight. When my father died last year and left me $30,000, Brady insisted we put it in our joint account for our future. That money was supposed to be for our house down payment. The money he just spent on a cruise with another woman, Victor added quietly. I set down my fork, appetite gone. 6 years of my life, and now I find out he's been planning to leave me while spending our savings on his coworker. People like Brady and Elaine see relationships as transactions, Victor said. I learned that too late with her. I was already successful when we met. Widowed with a comfortable portfolio from my banking career. She was charming, beautiful, and Brady was just a teenager who seemed to need a father figure. He sighed heavily. After we married, things changed. Expenses increased, justified as living the life we deserve. When I tried to maintain some financial boundaries, I became the villain. Stingy, controlling, not really committed to the family. That sounds familiar, I murmured. After dinner, Victor led me to his study, a small room Brady's mother had converted to a meditation space, but that still held Victor's desk. Help me with the painting, he requested, pointing to a mediocre landscape on the wall. Behind it was not as safe as I expected, but a loose panel in the wall. Victor removed it and pulled out a weatherproof document case. My real assets, he explained, spreading the contents across the desk. Investments Elaine knows nothing about. Property in Vermont. Accounts in the Cayman Islands from my banking days. I stared at the documents in shock. The amounts were substantial. The next morning, I woke with renewed purpose. Victor and I had stayed up late strategizing. And now it was time to put our plan into action. After checking on Victor, who was having a relatively good day despite his condition, I made a quick breakfast and laid out our priorities. First, I said, pouring him a cup of tea. We need to establish the narrative of your rapid decline. Victor nodded. Patricia mentioned her brother owns a medical supply company. He might be willing to help discreetly. One phone call later and Patricia's brother James was on board. By noon, he arrived in an unmarked van with everything we needed. An oxygen tank, non-functioning but visually convincing for stands, monitors with detachable leads, and even a collection of empty medication vials with realistic-looking labels. Medical theater. James called it that with a wink as he helped us transform Victor's bedroom into what looked like an intensive home care setup. Used to stage medical dramas sometimes. Never thought I'd be using my props for real-life drama. With Victor's direction, I arranged the equipment for maximum visual impact. The oxygen tank was prominently displayed, the stand positioned by the bed. Various monitoring devices were arranged on the bedside table. I made the bed with hospital-grade sheets Patricia had also provided, completing the illusion of serious medical intervention. Now for the photographic evidence, I said, taking out my phone. Victor settled into bed, coaching me on how to make him appear worse than he was. Shadows, he instructed. Lighting from above will deepen the hollows of my face. He removed his glasses, making his eyes appear sunken, and mussed his thin hair. With minimal theatrical makeup skills from my college days, I accentuated the pallor already present in his complexion. The transformation was startling. In the photos, Victor looked like he was actively dying. Far worse than his actual condition, though that was serious enough. Now you, Victor directed. You need to look exhausted, overwhelmed. I removed my makeup, tousled my hair, and put on an oversized sweater that made me appear smaller, more vulnerable. Victor took several photos of me seemingly asleep in the uncomfortable chair beside his bed. Others of me preparing medications with a worried expression. Perfect, he said, reviewing the images. Who's our target for these? Brady's sister, Melissa, I replied. According to your phone, she's the only one who's texted to check on you since they left. I crafted a carefully worded message to accompany the photos. Victor had a difficult night. Fever spiked to 102. Managing pain as best I can. We'll keep you updated. Direct, clinical, but with an undertone of concern that would trigger either guilt or at least interest. Melissa replied within minutes. Oh no, poor Uncle Victor. Keep me posted. Hook set, Victor murmured when I showed him the response. Next came my most difficult performance yet. I called Brady's phone, knowing he wouldn't answer, but that his voicemail would record my message. Victor activated the recording app on his phone to preserve my side of the conversation. "Brady, it's me again," I said, injecting controlled panic into my voice. "Victor's condition is deteriorating faster than expected. The hospice nurse is concerned about his breathing. Please call me back as soon as you can." I paused, then added with just the right tremor, "I really need your support right now." I made similar calls every few hours, each message increasingly urgent, each carefully recorded. Between calls, I created a detailed medical log with fictional but realistic episodes. Temperature spikes, pain breakthrough, respiratory difficulties. I backdated some entries to create a consistent narrative of decline beginning before they even left on their cruise. "You should have been an actress," Victor commented as I showed him the log. "I prefer to think of it as creative nonfiction," I replied with a grim smile. "Every good story needs documentation." Around 4 o'clock that afternoon, our planning was interrupted by a knock at the door. I opened it to find an elderly woman holding a covered casserole dish. "I'm Edith Peterson from next door," she announced. "Thought you might need some dinner." Looking after Victor is a full-time job, I imagine. I invited her in, grateful for both the food and the unexpected opportunity she presented. Over coffee, Mrs. Peterson revealed herself as a potential goldmine of information and support. "Been watching that family for years," she confided, lowering her voice as though Victor might overhear from his bedroom, though he was actually resting. "The way they treat that poor man. Your husband is no better than his mother, if you don't mind my saying so." "I don't mind at all," I assured her. "I'm discovering exactly what kind of family I married into." Mrs. Peterson patted my hand. "Victor was so good to that boy, you know. Paid for his college, bought him his first car. And how does Brady repay him? By taking off on vacation while his stepfather is dying." I let my genuine anger and hurt show. "They left me a note. Just a note telling me to take care of him." "Shameful," Mrs. Peterson declared. "Absolutely shameful. You know, the whole neighborhood has noticed. Last month when Victor fell in the yard, it was my Harold who helped him up. Brady was inside watching football, ignored our knocks completely." By the time she left, Mrs. Peterson had promised to spread the word among the neighbors that Victor needed support and visitors while his family was selfishly gallivanting in the Caribbean. I carefully documented her statements and the date of her visit. Over the next 2 days, 5 more neighbors visited, each with their own stories of witnessing Brady's neglect of Victor. Each visit strengthened our case and provided additional witnesses to both Victor's apparent decline and the family's absence during what they believed to be his final days. On Saturday morning, Patricia returned with the final documents for the asset transfers. We drove Victor to the local bank where he'd been a customer for over 30 years. The manager, Mr. Collins, greeted him warmly. "Victor, good to see you out and about. How are you feeling?" "Getting my affairs in order, Richard," Victor replied, his voice deliberately weaker than usual. "Memory still sharp even if the body's failing." In the privacy of the manager's office, Victor officially transferred control of his hidden assets to a series of trusts that would benefit me and several elder care charities. Mr. Collins watched with sympathy as Victor's shaking hand signed each document. "Your stepson was in last week," the manager mentioned casually as we completed the paperwork, "asking about your accounts." I reminded him that without proper authorization, Victor smiled thinly. "Always planning ahead, that boy. I remember when he came in to cash that check for his graduation gift," Mr. Collins continued. "Didn't even thank you. Just complained it wasn't enough for the car he wanted." Another piece of evidence, another witness to Brady's character. That evening, as we were reviewing our progress, Victor's phone rang with a video call from Melissa. We quickly put our plan into action, arranging Victor in bed, surrounded by medical equipment, an oxygen cannula in his nostrils. I mussed my hair and pinched my cheeks to bring a stressed flush to my face. When I answered the call, the camera showed me first, looking exhausted. Oh, Jade, Melissa gasped. You look terrible. Is everything okay? Managing, I said simply, turning the phone toward Victor, who gave an Oscar-worthy performance of semi-consciousness, his breathing deliberately labored. Uncle Victor? Melissa called. It's Melissa, can you hear me? Victor's eyes fluttered weakly. Melissa, he whispered. That you, sweetheart? The concern in Melissa's voice sounded genuine. But what came next revealed her true priorities. Should we come home early? Is he going to make it until Monday? I turned the camera back to my face. It's hard to say. The hospice nurse thinks his systems are shutting down. If you want to say goodbye, let me talk to Brady and Mom, she said quickly. The thing is, these tickets were non-refundable, and Mom's been so stressed lately. I nodded understandingly while fighting back genuine disgust. Of course, it's just that Victor keeps asking for Brady in his more lucid moments. I'll tell him to call, Melissa promised as soon as they get back from their shore excursion. After ending the call, Victor sat up and removed the oxygen cannula. Did you record that? I held up my other phone, which had captured the entire conversation. Every word. Victor's smile was satisfied, but tinged with genuine sadness. My family weighing their cruise tickets against saying goodbye to me. I knew it would happen exactly like this. I sat on the edge of his bed, suddenly emotional. I'm sorry, Victor. He shook his head. Don't be. Their true colors needed to be revealed. He reached for my hand. You know what the strangest part is? These past few days with you, with someone who actually cares, have been better than months with them. We sat in companionable silence, contemplating what we had set in motion and the final steps yet to come. Our counterattack was fully underway. The trap nearly set. Now we just needed to spring it at precisely the right moment. Sunday morning dawned with a subtle shift in the atmosphere. As I brought Victor his morning tea, I noticed his hands trembling more than usual. A bluish tint around his lips that hadn't been there before. You don't have to pretend for me, I said softly, helping him sit up. You're really not feeling well today, are you? Victor's smile was thin but genuine. Ironic, isn't it? After all our play acting, the real thing sneaks up on us. I called the hospice nurse who had been making weekly visits before the family left. She promised to come by that afternoon, but advised me on managing his comfort in the meantime. This wasn't acting anymore. Victor was actively declining, and a rush of protectiveness swept over me. Our revenge scheme suddenly felt secondary to ensuring his comfort and dignity. What would you like for breakfast? I asked, trying to maintain normalcy. Peaches, he said, surprising me. Fresh peaches with cream. My late wife Martha used to prepare them every Sunday morning. The request sent me to 3 different grocery stores before finding decent peaches in November. When I returned and prepared them as he described, sliced into perfect crescents with a dollop of whipped cream, Victor's eyes misted over at the first bite. Just like she used to make, he whispered. No one's bothered to remember such things about me in years. Throughout the day, I found myself doing things not for our plan, but simply for Victor's comfort, adjusting his pillows, reading aloud from his dog-eared copy of Raymond Chandler's The Big Sleep, playing the classical music he mentioned enjoying. The genuine care that had developed between us over our short time together surprised me with its intensity. You know, Victor said during a lucid moment that afternoon, I haven't been treated with such kindness since Martha died 12 years ago. Strange how a stranger has shown me more compassion than my own family. The hospice nurse Diane arrived around 3. After examining Victor, she took me aside in the hallway. His organs are shutting down, she said gently. It's happening faster than we anticipated. I'd say he has hours, maybe a day at most. Though I'd known this was coming, the news hit me harder than expected. Should I call the family? I asked, suddenly uncertain about our elaborate plan. Diane shook her head. At this point, it should be about his comfort, not theirs. If they've chosen not to be here, she left the rest unsaid. After she left, I sat beside Victor, who had overheard everything despite our hushed voices. "Don't call them," he said firmly. "They made their choice, but we do need to finalize some matters." He reached for my hand. "Call Patricia. Tell her it's time for the final steps." Patricia arrived within the hour, bringing a notary named Thomas with her. Victor was remarkably alert as they entered, as if summoning his remaining strength for this last important task. "Are you sure you're up to this?" Patricia asked, concerned by his appearance. "More certain than ever," Victor replied. "Death has a way of clarifying priorities." They finalized the last paperwork, documents that officially transferred control of his assets to me as trustee with specifications for charitable donations to elder abuse prevention organizations. The new will explicitly mention Brady's abandonment as the reason for his disinheritance. "Now for the letter," Victor said after signing the last document. Patricia set up her tablet to record as Victor dictated a message to be read to the family after his death. What emerged wasn't the angry condemnation I might have expected, but something far more powerful, an expression of profound disappointment and the deep pain of being treated as a burden rather than a father. "To my family," he began, his voice gaining strength with each word. "By the time you read this, I will be gone. Not that my presence or absence seemed to matter much to you in recent years." He detailed specific instances of neglect without accusation, simply stating facts. Holidays spent alone while they vacationed. Medical appointments cancelled for convenience. Overheard comments about waiting for the old man to die. "I don't write this from anger," he continued, "but from a place of clarity that comes when one faces the end. The greatest pain in life is not illness or even death, but the realization that those you loved saw you only as an obligation, a task to be managed, an inconvenience to be tolerated." By the time he finished, even Thomas the notary, a professional who must have witnessed countless wills and final messages, was discreetly wiping his eyes. Patricia, despite her usual stoic demeanor, reached for Victor's hand. "We'll make sure they hear every word," she promised. After they left, Victor asked for his old video camera. "They might question my mental capacity," he explained. "I want to record my testimony while I'm clearly lucid." I set up the camera and Victor delivered a 20-minute statement directly to the lens. He was remarkably composed, methodically describing years of gradual neglect and his decision to leave his estate to me. "Jade showed me more dignity in 4 days than my family did in 4 years. He stated clearly, "She is the only one who earned the right to benefit from what I spent a lifetime building." He described specific incidents, Brady's dismissive comments at doctor's appointments, meals left just out of reach, medications forgotten during weekend trips. The recording was devastating in its calm delivery, and damning in its details. By evening, Victor's energy was fading. I helped him to the living room at his request, settling him in his favorite chair by the window. "There's a bottle of port in my study," he said. "Behind the economics textbooks, Martha and I were saving it for our 50th anniversary." I found the dusty bottle where he described and poured a small amount into 2 crystal glasses I discovered in a neglected cabinet. "To justice," Victor said, raising his glass with effort. "To dignity," I added. We sat together as darkness fell. Victor occasionally dozing while I read to him from his favorite book. He spoke intermittently about Martha, about his early career, about trips they had planned but never taken. Not once did he mention Brady or his mother. Around midnight, I noticed his breathing had changed. I set my book aside and simply held his hand. There was no drama, no last-minute revelations or deathbed confessions. Victor simply slipped away, his hand growing cool in mine as his breathing gradually stopped. For a long moment, I sat motionless, tears streaming down my face. The man I'd known for only 4 days had somehow become important to me beyond our mutual desire for justice. In caring for him, I'd found a strength and clarity I didn't know I possessed. At dawn, I called Diane, the hospice nurse, who arrived promptly to confirm what I already knew. She seemed surprised by how peaceful Victor appeared. "Many terminal patients show signs of distress," she commented. "He looks like he simply fell asleep." "He did," I said quietly, reading Raymond Chandler and drinking 50-year-old port. After Diane made the official pronouncement, I called the funeral home Patricia had recommended. 2 somber men arrived within the hour to collect Victor's body. One of them knew Victor from community functions and expressed genuine condolences. He was a good man, he said, always generous with the fundraisers. Once they left, the house felt suddenly empty. I allowed myself a few moments of genuine grief before focusing on the next phase of our plan. Brady and his family would be returning the following day, expecting to find a dying man they could comfort in his final hours, thereby easing any guilt about their abandonment. Instead, they would find me and the consequences of their actions. I placed Victor's letter in a cream-colored envelope and propped it against the family photo on the mantelpiece. A photo I now noticed showed Brady and his mother smiling broadly while Victor stood slightly apart. In the dining room, I arranged the extensive documentation of neglect in clearly labeled folders: cancelled medical appointments, financial exploitation, recorded evidence of neglect. Victor's video testimony was queued up on the television, ready to play at the press of a button. Finally, I went to the master bedroom and packed my few belongings. Beside my suitcase, I placed printouts of the cruise photos Brady and his family had posted throughout the week, creating a stark visual timeline that contrasted their poolside cocktails with Victor's documented decline. Everything was arranged for maximum impact when they returned. A carefully orchestrated revelation that would ensure they faced the full weight of their choices. Standing in the center of the silent house, I felt a profound sense of purpose. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice for a man who deserved far better than he'd received from those who should have cared for him most. "It's done, Victor," I said softly to the empty room. "They'll understand exactly what they've lost." I spent Monday morning in a strange calm, waiting for the inevitable. Around noon, I heard the sound of car doors slamming, followed by laughter and chatter as Brady and his family returned from their cruise. Taking a deep breath, I smoothed down the simple black dress I'd purchased the day before and positioned myself in the living room near Victor's empty rocking chair. The front door burst open. Brady entered first, his mother, Elaine, right behind him, followed by Melissa and Hannah, the colleague, who was clearly more than that. They were all sunburned and smiling, arms laden with duty-free shopping bags and tacky souvenirs. "Honey, we're home," Brady called out, his voice cheerful until he saw me standing there, my expression solemn. His smile faltered. "What's with the funeral get-up?" Elaine pushed past him, dropping her designer handbag on the console table. "Where's Dad? Is he napping?" Her tone was casual, as if inquiring about a pet rather than her dying husband. "Victor passed away Saturday night," I said quietly. The shopping bags in Brady's hands dropped to the floor. Hannah, uncertain what to do, took a step back toward the door. "What do you mean passed away?" Elaine demanded as if I'd made a mistake in vocabulary. "He died peacefully in his sleep around midnight," I continued, maintaining my composure. "The funeral service was yesterday afternoon. Many of your neighbors attended along with Victor's friends from his banking days. Quite a lovely turnout, actually." Brady's face cycled through shock, disbelief, and then most tellingly, calculation. "You held the funeral without us, without his family." "His family was invited," I replied. "I left multiple messages about his declining condition." "You chose not to respond." Melissa stepped forward, her face pale beneath her tan. "I told you about that call, Brady," I said. "Uncle Victor looked really bad." Brady waved her off impatiently. This is unbelievable. We need to sit down." "Yes," I agreed. "We do." I gestured to the living room where Victor's letter waited on the coffee table. They filed in silently, nobody wanting to sit in Victor's rocking chair, which stood empty like an accusation. "There are some things you need to know," I said, picking up the cream-colored envelope. "Victor left this letter to be read to you upon your return." "Did he change his will?" Elaine interjected bluntly. "Is that what this is about?" I met her eyes directly. "Perhaps you should hear his words first." I unfolded the letter and began reading Victor's message. His disappointment flowed through my voice. "The holidays spent alone. The doctor's appointments cancelled for convenience. The overheard comments about waiting for the old man to die. As I read, I watched their reactions. Elaine's face hardened defensively. Brady fidgeted, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Melissa looked increasingly uncomfortable. The greatest pain in life, I read, is not illness or even death, but the realization that those you loved saw you only as an obligation, a task to be managed, an inconvenience to be tolerated. When I finished, a heavy silence filled the room. Hannah, clearly wishing to be anywhere else, stared at her feet. Finally, Brady cleared his throat. Look, Dad was confused at the end. His medication. Victor was perfectly lucid, I interrupted. In fact, he made a video statement you might want to see. This is ridiculous, Elaine declared. Some end-of-life ramblings from a sick old man don't change the legal realities. Brady is his next of kin, Anne. Actually, I said, standing up. There's more you should see. I led them to the dining room where I'd arranged the evidence files. Brady's eyes widened as he took in the meticulous documentation laid out in chronological order. What is all this? He demanded. Evidence, I replied simply. Of financial exploitation, medical neglect, and abandonment. I opened the first folder, revealing bank statements with highlighted transfers. Victor kept detailed records of every dollar taken from his accounts for supposed care expenses that were never provided. Elaine snatched up one of the statements. He gave us that money. We were caring for him. By leaving him alone for Thanksgiving with inadequate medication, no food in the refrigerator, and the heat turned down to 62 degrees? I asked, opening another folder containing the timeline of their departure preparations. There are statements from 6 different neighbors who witnessed his neglect. And then there's this. I pressed play on the tablet and Victor's video testimony began. His calm, articulate description of years of mistreatment silenced even Elaine's protests. Brady's face grew increasingly pale as Victor described specific incidents, medications diluted, appointments cancelled, disparaging comments made when they thought he couldn't hear. This is all a setup, Brady finally sputtered, jabbing a finger toward me. She manipulated a dying man. The doorbell rang before I could respond. Perfect timing. Patricia stood on the doorstep, Notary Thomas beside her. Am I interrupting? She asked with professional coolness. Not at all, I replied. The family has just returned and was reviewing Victor's final message. Excellent. Then I can proceed with the official notification. Patricia placed her briefcase on the dining table and removed several documents. As executor of Victor Harmon's estate, I'm here to inform you of the provisions of his final will and testament. Brady straightened, composing himself. A smug smile began to form on his lips. Fine, let's get to the point. Patricia adjusted her glasses. The will is quite straightforward. Victor Harmon has left the entirety of his estate to Jade Mitchell with provisions for substantial donations to several elder abuse prevention organizations. The stunned silence that followed was broken by Elaine's shrill voice. That's impossible. We're his family. The will explicitly cites abandonment and neglect as reasons for disinheritance, Patricia continued calmly. It has been properly witnessed, notarized, and filed with the court. Mr. Harmon was examined by 2 separate physicians who certified his mental competence at the time of signing. Brady's smugness evaporated. This is fraud. We'll contest it. You're welcome to try, Patricia replied unfazed. However, given the extensive documentation of neglect, the video testimony, and witness statements, I would advise against it. You'd only be spending money you don't have. What do you mean money we don't have? Elaine demanded. Patricia exchanged a glance with me before continuing. The properties you currently occupy, including your primary residence, belong to the Harmon Family Trust, which is now under Jade's control as trustee. Furthermore, the investment accounts you've been drawing from have been frozen pending audit for potential financial abuse. Brady's face drained of all color. That's not possible. The house is mine. Dad promised. Victor promised nothing, I interjected. You assumed. There's a difference. The implications were sinking in. Brady had spent their savings on the cruise, counting on his inheritance to cover their mounting debts. The house they lived in wasn't his to sell or borrow against. What about our college funds? Melissa asked in a small voice. Grandpa set those up for us. Brady couldn't meet his sister's eyes. Patricia answered gently. Victor provided funds to your father for that purpose several years ago. However, those accounts were never established. Melissa turned to Brady, horror dawning on her face. You spent our college money. The family erupted into accusations and denials. Hannah quietly slipped out the front door, escaping the implosion. I let the chaos continue for a few minutes before stepping away to retrieve my suitcase from the bedroom. When I returned, Brady followed me into the hallway, his demeanor completely transformed. Jade, please, he begged, his voice breaking. We can work this out. I made a mistake with Hannah. It didn't mean anything. We can start over. I'll change. I promise. I looked at this man I had once loved, seeing him clearly, perhaps for the first time. Behind the handsome features and practiced charm was someone who had never truly cared for me or anyone but himself. Calmly, I removed my wedding ring and placed it in his palm, followed by the keys to our apartment. You left him to die, I said quietly. Now you get nothing, including me. I walked toward the door, suitcase in hand. Brady's pleas turned to threats as he followed me. You won't get away with this. I'll fight it in court. You manipulated a sick old man. At the doorway, I turned back briefly. Everything was done legally. You taught me one valuable lesson in our marriage, Brady. Always keep receipts. I stepped outside into the bright November sunshine. Behind me, I could hear Brady's continued protests and Elaine's angry voice demanding Patricia explain how this could happen. But those voices were already fading, becoming part of a past I was leaving behind. Patricia had arranged for a room at a quiet hotel while I figured out my next steps. As I placed my suitcase in the trunk of my car, Mrs. Peterson appeared on her porch across the street. She gave me a knowing nod and a small wave. I waved back, feeling a surprising lightness despite the emotional weight of the past few days. Victor's final gift wasn't just financial security, though that would certainly help me rebuild my life. The true gift was the clarity and strength I'd found while helping him find justice. As I drove away from the house and the shattered family inside it, I wasn't thinking about revenge or even vindication. I was thinking about second chances, about honoring Victor's memory by living well, and about the unexpected bond that had formed between two people who'd been discarded by those who should have cared for them most. Victor had found peace. Now it was my turn to do the same.